Chapter 3. The day after Christmas, I woke up feeling restless, but one glance outside revealed slick, glistening sidewalks. I'd hoped to get out of the house early and get the adrenaline going, but running on ice was impossible. Instead, I decided to work the phones. The goal was to set up appointments with Madeline Price, the friend, Peter Abernathy, the brother, and the owner of the liquor store where Liza's body was found. I tried Madeline Price first. A soft, calm voice informed me that I'd reached Madeline before the message provided several options. Press 1 for information on yoga classes, 2 for mental health services, and 3 for personal inquiries. I pressed 3 and left my name, the reason for my call, and my number on the voice service. Next, I called Peter Abernathy and got his voicemail. His voice sounded angry and rushed, but he managed to contain himself and record a relatively professional-sounding message. The only person I managed to get a hold of was the liquor store owner, Ali Mansour. The phone rang twice before someone picked up and said, "Hello? May I speak to Mr. Ali Mansour? This is him." "Hello, my name is Sylvia Wilcox. I am a private detective investigating the murder of Liza Stark, and I'd like to come in and ask you a few questions." There was silence on the line. "Mr. Mansour?" "Yes." I don't want nothing to do with that. Long time ago. And I already talked to the police about it," the man shouted, his Middle Eastern accent thick and heavy. "Mr. Mansour, I understand, but I need a little bit of—" "No!" "Mr. Mansour, no, no, no!" "Sir, what would happen if the Detroit Police Department came in and checked your employee roster?" Silence. "What if undercover cops came to your store and waited for a minor to buy alcohol?" "I hated to be one of those PIs, but sometimes you have to pull the police card." "Fine. What do you want to know?" "I'd like to come by and talk with you." "That it?" "Yes." "Not a bunch of cops?" "No, just me." "Oh, okay." His voice was calm now. "That is okay. I thought you want to bring a lot of cops." "Nope. It's best that it's just you and I." "When?" "Today, around noon." "Fine," he said before hanging up. I showered and got dressed and headed out. Pushing the Taurus just a few miles per hour over the speed limit, I was able to hit I-96 at 11:11 a.m. During the drive, I gave the scene a mental comb-over. Strangers in a strange part of town had found the body. Even though a multitude of murders had occurred in that area and gunfire was a daily part of life, Liza's murder was unique. She didn't look like typical Brightmoor fare. That corner of the city did have more diversity than the rest of town, but even so, the inhabitants had a look. Deep bags under their eyes, faded faces, slow shuffling walks, and bovine gazes that told a story of hopelessness. If Liza Stark had been slumming it for a piece on the side, someone would have noticed her shiny red Range Rover cruising around. Traffic was relatively light at the time of day, and I was able to cruise to Brightmoor with ease. Passing through Bedford Township, I was reminded of the home Derek and I shared west of Telegraph Road. There was a time when Detroit cops were required to live within the city's boundaries, but by the time we were in DPD, that restriction had been dropped. Even so, we had decided to move into a section of the city where a bunch of retired cops and old-timers who were still on the force lived. Our little neighborhood on the outskirts of the city had been full of civil servants who needed a Detroit address but wanted to be as close to the border as possible. Quiet, well-kept lawns lined streets of modest two-story brick bungalows and ramblers. Children played in carefully laid-out streets. The diversity lacking in most of Detroit lived within the 5 blocks preceding the working-class suburb of Redford. A few mom-and-pop businesses had survived the explosion of shopping malls and corporate fast food chains, making the neighborhood a hidden gem of community and safety. We were well armed, and all the thugs on the other side of Telegraph Road knew it. There was little reason to venture across Telegraph Road except for work, but I had driven past the area where Liza's body was found countless times when I was a cop. Even though the murder had taken place over 2 years ago and all physical evidence was long gone, talking to the store owner who had found the body still might be fruitful. I pulled up in front of the store around noon. The sign on the storefront simply read, "Beer, Wine, Liquor." The corner store served as a one-stop grocery store, convenience store, and anything else you might need store. It was larger than average, but it carried with it the telltale signs of most neighborhood joints. Once inside the door, I spotted expired food lining the shelves, miscellaneous rotting fruit hanging off the front counter, and greasy processed pizza, chicken, and hamburgers filling the stands close to the checkout window. A thick plate of bulletproof glass separated the clerk from the patrons, and the butt of a shotgun could be seen just underneath the counter. Just your typical Detroit party store. Ali Mansour wore a knitted cap on his balding head and a cream-colored traditional robe. His smile, thin and forced, was clear, even though he was behind the thick sheet of plexiglass. We'd made eye contact the moment I pushed open the heavy glass door. He gave a small wave, completed a transaction, and dropped a handful of change into the shallow silver well. He called for a young woman in a hijab who was stocking shelves in the food aisle. She looked up, nodded, smiled at me, and headed behind the counter. "Mr. Mansour." "Mrs. Wilcox." His eyes brightened with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Yes. Hello. Sylvia Wilcox," I said, holding out my hand and receiving a firm handshake in return from Ali. "Mrs. Wilcox, nice to meet you. We can talk in the storage room," Ali said, unlocking the cage that separated the cash register from the store. Ali was tall, close to 6 feet, but he walked with a stoop, which caused him to look slightly slumped over. His face was encased in a thick black beard that was neatly cropped 2 or 3 inches from his chin. "Thanks for taking the time to meet with me," I said. "No problem," Ali said in a soft tone. I followed him down the teeny hallway that emptied into a room full of flattened boxes and random stock. He motioned for me to sit on a rusty gray folding chair. "So you'd only been open a short time before you found the body, correct?" I asked. The rickety folding chair wobbled a bit. I said a prayer that it would last the length of the interview. "Yes, we had been open only a few weeks," Ali said with a heavy accent. "Now you've been open for 2 years, right?" "Correct, close to 2 years." "Did you know this was gang territory and a very bad neighborhood when you opened the store?" "I grew up in Gaza. I'm not afraid of bad areas." "Would you say that you have the same customers over and over again?" I knew he did, but I wanted to prime him for the next question. Ali shook his head. "Yes." He was starting to look bored. "I know it will be hard to remember, but did anything out of the ordinary happen the day before you found Liza's body? Was it busy?" "My fourth son was born," Ali said, a smile spread across his face. "Congratulations," I said. If Ali's son had been born the day before Liza's body was dumped, he would remember the day better than if nothing important happened in life. This interview might net good information. "I was in the store behind the counter when my wife called. I jumped up and down, told customers I had to close early, and left around 8 that night." "Were there people in the store when you found out?" "Yes, but I don't remember them. I was too excited about my son." "Some customers would have known that the store closed early that night. They could have spread the word." "Is there anything else you remember about that night?" I asked. "I was leaving around 8, but ended up staying a few extra minutes because a customer showed up. She was mad because I was closing early. I asked her if it was an emergency. She said no, and after I explained why I was closing, she understood." "Do you know the woman's name?" "Ah, yes, she's a regular. Very nice, lives around the corner. Nice house, nice husband." "May I have her name?" "Amber. Amber Dukes, I think is her name. Nice house, you can't miss it." "Thanks, that's helpful. Do you remember posting a sign or anything like that to let people know that the store was closing early?" "No, I didn't want everyone to know. Just those who came into the store. Letting the entire neighborhood know would not be smart. If someone stopped by and saw that the store was closed, it would be better for them to think that it was out of business than for me to tell everyone I was closing early." He had a good point. Broadcasting that he was closing early would have been an invitation for robbery. "So the only people who knew were customers who came into the store that day?" Ali nodded. That meant that the killer probably had been in the store. Do you have surveillance tapes? Of course, the police took them. I'd have to check with the detective who'd worked the case and see if any evidence had been garnered from the tapes. Mr. Mansu, is there anything else you remember? The police didn't seem interested. But you might care. I do care. What weren't they interested in? The first few weeks the store was open, gangs bothered us. That's why we have the gun. After that lady was found dead in the alley, no more gangs bothered us. That was interesting. Perhaps Liza had been slumming it after all. What were the gangs doing? Breaking windows, graffiti, harassing my daughter. And that stopped after the body was found. Yes, Ali said. Strange, I thought. May I see the alley? I asked. Sure. I followed Ali to the back of the storeroom, dodging cardboard. I will wait in the door. I don't want to leave a woman in the alley by herself, Ali said. I nodded and headed into the alley. A pale brown, rusted-out dumpster sat in the midst of trash and overgrown grass. The alley was lined with abandoned buildings. It was a great place to dump a body. I tried to imagine a scenario that would end with Liza's body behind the dumpster. Why would she have been in this alley? Mrs. Wilcox, Ali called from the doorway. Will you be much longer? I'd come back later if I needed to. No, in fact, I'm all done. Thanks for your time, I called. We headed back inside. I bought a pack of gum from Ali, waved goodbye, and left the store. On my way out, some unpleasant kids in gang colors pushed past me. 3 loud, boyish-looking girls with cornrows, bandanas, and saggy jeans muttered a litany of swear words as they rambled up and down the aisles. 2 of the girls were tall and thin, but the third one, a short, chunky girl, appeared to be their leader. I tried to avoid eye contact, but Chunky Girl fought to lock eyes with me. She was no more than 14, maybe 15 years old, but her face was already hardened from the wear and tear of life. Her forehead bore several lines of wrinkles, and her eyes were a dirty sea green color that made me think of a contaminated ocean. I nodded and pushed past the girls. Outside, a skeleton-like body was lurching around near the passenger side of the Taurus. I ran my hand over the butt of my gun and made sure my shoes clicked loudly on the pavement. Hopefully, the being would scramble away as he heard me approaching. When I got within 4 feet of the emaciated body, it began to slowly pivot to face me. The remnants of breast lay flat on her stomach, and a white film encircled the woman's mouth. When she tried to speak, the hole in her face produced a hollow pink and black pathway that croaked, "Spare change," in a raspy voice. I took my hand off the butt of the gun, dug into my pocket, and produced a piece of lint and 2 quarters. I dropped it into her hand and muttered, "May God have mercy." On my way back to the freeway, I decided to drive past the house of Amber, the woman who had come into the store the night Ali Mansu had closed early. Nice houses in Brightmoor are noticeable because they are the extreme exception. I drove down to Costa Street and immediately recognized what had to be Amber's house. A modest but well-kept brick home set behind a gated fence. I checked my phone for the time and surveyed the neighborhood. Impromptu interviews aren't ideal, but I wanted to at least get a look at the landscape. I looked up and down the block of burned-out houses. I assumed that some of them had been firebombed in drug turf wars. What I assumed to be Amber Duke's house sat behind a chain-link fence that had freshly shoveled sidewalks and a spatter of salt on the stairs leading to a teeny, uncovered porch. I got out and walked along the street in front of the house. A worn, welcome doormat was caked with gray snow and salt. There was a "Beware of Dog" sign on the chain-link gate, and to back up that warning, 2 large Rottweilers ran around the side of the house with gusto, barking and making their presence known. I jotted down the address and headed back to the car.